In the wake of our first video comparing and contrasting furries and bronies, we received a wide range of comments and feedback. Some were happy to see the similarities between the two fandoms, some shared their love of both sides, while others were pleasantly surprised to have learned something new about one community or the other. Still others appreciated the comparison, but expressly declared their allegiance to one fandom while distancing themselves from the other.
Though for the life of me, I can't see why anyone would want to distance themselves from the furry fandom. But in all seriousness, a couple of subscribers left comments asking, essentially, if there really were a conflict between us about getting each other to join the other fandom. In all honesty, there is no conflict. Dr. Wolf and I have had very objective discussions on the matter, and we both understand the other's point of view. Calling him a closet furry was just playful banter, given because I already know how he feels about it, and because he knows I'm only teasing him.
We respect everyone's opinions and desires to participate in either or both communities. However, there are still some who would group all bronies into the furry fandom because, according to one definition, bronies are simply furries who prefer to focus on cartoon ponies with a degree of humanized attributes. While this may be a technically correct definition, I believe it is somewhat short-sighted.
I guess it all depends on what the actual definition of a furry is. Personally, I feel that anyone who loves animal characters with some degree of human attributes could be considered a furry. For some, the term furry means those who attend furry conventions and draw furry artwork. Some go so far as to say that it means you have a spiritual connection to animals. Whatever the definition may be, I think I would probably be perceived as offensive by some bronies if I said, "You're a furry even if you don't like to be called that." Some bronies resent being called furries, because, in their understanding of the term, they don't consider themselves furries. Even among those who like anthropomorphic animals, there are those who don't like being called furry.
Likewise, there are many people out there who like the show MLP but don't consider themselves bronies, and I think that has to do with how much involvement they have with the fandom. I don't believe that a person becomes a brony just because they have seen the show and happen to be outside the target demographic. Personally, I believe that being a brony takes much more than that. I believe that a brony is someone who seeks out the fandom to take part in it, like creating artwork, stories, games, videos, and many other kinds of content. But you can also be a brony even if you don't create anything to add to the fandom. If you are seeking out other like-minded individuals and enjoy discussing, quoting, or watching the show with other fans, then I would say that you have become a brony. In my mind, that would make the difference between a brony and someone who just likes watching the show.
And by that same token, I would say that a person shouldn't be considered a furry just because they enjoy animals with human-like characteristics. I believe that those who impose a label on someone else, simply because they seem to fit their own definition of that label, are doing a disservice to those who might resent having that label applied to them.
In some of my previous videos, I discussed at length the topic of anti-bronies. One of the points I focused on was how to deal with those who we perceive as offensive, whether that offense is intended or otherwise. At this point, I'd like to flip the coin and bring up what we can do to avoid being perceived as offensive. In this case specifically, I mean being sensitive to the perceptions of others.
Everyone sees the world around them through their own unique point of view. While some may feel that the term furry is defined very broadly and thus includes any group of fans around animals with human characteristics, it is important to understand that not everyone shares that point of view. Several bronies commented on our first video that they had always thought that the furry fandom was only focused around fursuits and adult content, and they were surprised to learn that this was not the case, that furries and bronies have much more in common than they realized. There were others who said that while they understood what was involved in the furry fandom, they didn't want to associate themselves with it for one reason or another. Clearly, there are a number of bronies who don't consider themselves furries, nor do they want to be lumped in with the furry community.
Even in the case where someone is drawing MLP characters for fun, I still wouldn't go as far as to call them a brony, like in the case of Teric here. A few months ago, I convinced him to join me at the Crystal Mountain Pony Convention, even though he had never been to a BronyCon before and had only seen a few episodes of the actual show.
Correction, I agreed to come because you didn't know what to expect at a convention. You brought me along as your wingman, admit it.
I had heard your efforts to get me to join you at a furry convention for years, and I just couldn't get excited about going to such a gathering. I was rather curious what it would be like to go to a convention, but a furry con just wasn't enough to get me interested. When I discovered that a Brony convention was coming to Salt Lake City, I figured that I had been curious long enough and decided that I should try and see what conventions were really about. And yeah, I can admit that going to a convention seemed like a much more enjoyable experience if I actually had another person to go with.
Yeah, zing.
Now, Teric had a lot of fun taking part in the convention. I'd say that he was enjoying it even more than I was. He even took part in an art class to learn how to draw in the MLP style, and he drew a portrait of Pinkie Pie.
Wait. You're going to show my artwork to your subscribers? Don't you have more than 1,000 of them? Oh gosh.
Seriously? I'm the one who was feeling hesitant about going to a convention all those months ago, while you were the one that was trying to get me to take part in far more than I was willing to. And now here we are with a bit of a role reversal. I'm the one who wants to increase your exposure to others, and you're the one being hesitant.
Hey now, when we went to the convention, you weren't asking me to display my work in front of more than 1,000 people.
I was glad to see Teric drawing a pony, and he certainly enjoyed making it. I even requested that he draw a Fluttershy pic, and I think that turned out rather nicely too. But even though he took part in doing some drawings for fun, and even though he enjoyed his exposure at the Brony convention, he still doesn't consider himself a Brony. And if I started calling him a closet Brony just because I've seen him enjoy a few aspects of the fandom, would that mean that I'm right?
In your mind, perhaps, yes. But again, that's only your point of view. In my point of view, I don't consider myself a Brony by any means. Are either of us wrong to hold these opposing points of view? Not at all. So the question remains, which point of view is true or correct? Arguably, both of them are, because they're based on each of our own opinions and perceptions. They only become wrong when we attempt to impose our own point of view on someone else, without consideration that an opposing viewpoint may be equally valid.
There are many examples of this throughout history. In some instances, viewpoints and opinions were violently imposed upon others, such as in the cases of the Crusades, which involved forcible conversion to Christianity, and of the Nazis' efforts to eliminate those people they deemed as less than worthy. Some less violent examples were the persecution of religious minorities in Europe during the colonial era and the segregation of African Americans in the United States. Each of these is an instance where viewpoints and opinions were forced on someone else, and each of them resulted in widespread problems in society, to say the least.
So what does all this have to do with furries and bronies? I believe that there is an enormous potential for crossover and goodwill between these two communities. Each fandom has valuable things to teach and share with the other. However, I'm afraid that those who insist on applying labels and/or definitions to either fandom without consideration of any opposing viewpoints are damaging relationships between these two communities. As many have already pointed out, both of these fandoms already struggle to present a positive image of themselves to the world around us. We can't afford to make enemies of each other.
Even after all the times I obliterated you in Starcraft?
Ugh. You had to bring that up? As much of a career gamer as I am, I have to hand it to you. You're a much better Starcraft player than I. In all honesty, though, Doc, do you think you would have become a Brony if I had never exposed you to the furry fandom?
I suppose some of the first pony-related comics I came across were actually drawn by furry artists. I have read through more than a few furry comic strips, and I think those may have been the very first example of pony-related art that I saw on the internet. That was actually my first introduction to the fact that others were becoming interested in MLP. But I didn't actually start searching out the Brony fandom until I came across the videos on YouTube. In fact, one of the very earliest examples I found was the ponified version of the StarCraft 2 trailer, so maybe it was StarCraft that first got me interested in the Brony fandom.
This is Kerrigan. There's a wave of Zerg advancing on this position. We need immediate evac.
What happened to Kerrigan wasn't your fault.
At any rate, folks, if the Doc and I can not only make peace with each other, but also exchange ideas, videos, and other material from both fandoms, then I believe the communities as a whole can do the same.
What do you think? I'm sure that all of you, Brony, furry, or otherwise, have opinions one way or another about these two fandoms. Stop for a moment to consider your point of view. What kind of reactions might you expect if your point of view were to be made public? Would it help or hinder relations between the two communities? Do you strive to sincerely consider the viewpoints and perceptions of others, even if they might be opposed to your own? And does such consideration have any influence on your own perceptions? We would like to hear your thoughts about these topics, and here's to hoping for a greater amount of understanding in the future. Until next time, I am Dr. Wolf, and I look forward to hearing from you.
And I am TericDragon, and I'll be down there in the comments section, spying on what everyone says. Thanks for watching.